Thank you very much, Nadine. Welcome, everybody, on our OROS on the topic of gender-sensitive teaching with insights from African and Latin American contexts. I'm really very excited to see you all here. It's amazing. We have people from many different countries here. I don't have an overview now, but I think you will have the possibility during the coming 2 hours to meet one or the other new colleague also working on access to quality education somewhere around the world. So I'm so excited. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Beatrice Schulter. I'm the director of RECI, the Swiss Network for Education and International Cooperation. It's Nadine and me who are the back office of RECI. So you've already met Nadine, giving you all the help and support, and myself. But the RECI is, of course, much more than Nadine and me. It's 30 member organizations and individual members, all working in the field of education and international cooperation. And today's OROS has been proposed and prepared by our working group, Teacher Training for Quality Education. So it's a working group. I think also that is the reason why we will have today 3 different inputs on this very important topic, presenting this topic from different perspectives, aspects, contexts as well. And I am very much looking forward to tackling the topic of gender-sensitive teaching in this way. What I would like to underline for all of us here is that, yes, we're going to have presentations. So you will learn from the 3 colleagues who have prepared to present their experience, their work, their research. But what is very important for us in the OROS is to ensure that you are inspired to think, to ask questions, to contribute from your own experience. That's really the idea of these open space webinars that we do. And we are proposing a program that should facilitate this a little bit, even though we only have 2 hours. But I'm curious to see how we manage to do that, because also today what we have for the first time is we're doing the OROS in 2 languages. And I would already now like to thank Patricia Vega for the translation interpretation. So, and of course, Patricia, you let us know when we are going too fast. That's always. So let's take that time for learning from each other, from asking each other questions. This is really an open space. If you have comments or questions regarding the content, but also technical issues during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat right there, what you need, so we can try to follow suit. So I hope you all have your notes ready, and I am very sure that Lizeth Vergaray is ready with her presentation. So Lizeth is from Terre des Hommes. She is the national coordinator in Peru, and she is going to present us an interesting presentation on research, if I get it right, on masculinities. So I am very much looking forward to hearing what it has to tell us.
So in the work that I do and that we do, we have a transversal focus on education. Okay, that's a slide, thank you. So one of the most important aspects that we have spoken is to learn about the concepts. I'm going to go fast because I just have 5 minutes, so it's an important challenge for me. So I'm going to be speaking about how important it is to work, to do research, but specifically to work on masculinity, since this is linked directly to violence, to women, and to the identity of women. Among those, we have the mandate of masculinity, and those mandates are given depending on what society imposes the cultural values that explain men how to be men. And this is also linked to rejecting the feminine world, to violence, to showing at all times their virility, their sexual virility, and the sexual practices. And this sexual practices, in an investigation that was done by us a couple of years ago, is strongly linked to the male capital mandates. So it's a very important center, the sexual aspect and the exercise of the sexual aspect in men specifically. And this includes violent practices as well towards the abuse of the body of women. And these male capital mandates go, that's why you can see different circles. They have to do with different ways of thinking, of acting, of feeling for men. And this implies a heterosexual way of managing. It has to do with how they've been raised, and this is withheld by the patriarchal society. There's a subordination of the body of women, but it also places men on that exercise of power. It gives men some prestige, some honor, and that's where we're going to go a little bit deeper on the Homo society. They even need to demonstrate how men need to be, specifically society, but specifically to their parents, to other men, because they are constantly being evaluated. There's always scrutiny so that they do not leave those masculine mandates. That's why we're speaking about disciplining the body of men. The construction of masculinity is done by different socialization items. There are very different ones, but the main ones are school, community, and family. And the community is wide. We're going to see here a community, the religion, the communication, the means of communication, their friends, their peers, and others as well, who are the ones that will reproduce these masculine practices that are genuine and violent. They're patriarchal, and they learn how to be men. And the men in the studies that we have done regarding masculinity mentioned that there's no way of getting about it. It's a mandate, and that's how men should be. If we can go to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next one? And we can see that with that manner of learning in 2021 in Peru, we had the rejection of the feminine world and the exercise of violence to women, to the body of women. We have different numbers which are really alarming of situations of women who have disappeared, or mainly children and young ladies. And the cases of sexual violence, you can see it's almost 23% of cases of sexual violence against children and adolescent girls. And we work with this as well in Peru, since the reports of the national police, we also know that they are underage. So the gender violence has the face of women, and in Peru, the face of young women and girls. That's why it's so important. The proposal that in my presentation is that of educating to create egalitarian masculinities. We know that it is important to empower women. Of course it is. We do not need to make two different things, but empowering women is not enough, because the ones who are the aggressors of this violence are men. So it becomes necessary to work together with them so that we can disassemble these mandates to make them more egalitarian. So it is key to include in the educational curriculum this awareness raising, this analysis, this critical thinking about their representations, their narratives, their imaginaries of how their identities are created, how their masculine identity is constructed, and men and also women who legitimate this and the exercise of violence. That is why we need to empower the generation of adolescents and youth so that they can act as agents of change, so that they can act with gender equality without violence. So for them, it is also important to have actions from the educational curriculum and working with teachers to create actions towards these distances, meaning that they can do actions within their families, their schools, and their communities so that these stereotypes can be broken and this violence can stop starting from men. So that's why I also mentioned that sexuality is key in teaching what virility is, what being a man is. And that is why it is so important also to work and implement sexual education so that we can train regarding respectful and egalitarian masculinities with affection. If we can see the next slide then. From Terre des Hommes Suisse, we're working on a toolbox that it's still a work in progress. It's for male adolescents, agents of change. It's a toolkit for the promotion of egalitarian masculinities for the prevention of gender-based violence, and it has these different objectives that we can provide didactic resources for teachers so that we can encourage their adolescents, boys, to reflect critically, to change their attitudes, and to question those beliefs that they tolerate and reproduce violence against women. We also provide conceptual resources because we also need to speak about the theoretical part for pedagogy to guide the reflections. And they can reflect with their students. And of course, as I was saying, that they can take action. They can be actors of change. They can act on those socializing instances that are precisely the ones that are reproducing and producing the male mandates. So these are 9 sessions that are under construction to identify gender roles and stereotypes in adolescence. How is it that we have learned to be men, to identify if their identity is violent or not, liberating themselves from the male mandates, the initiative they have, the expectations they have of women, romantic love, but not generalizing that it is negative, but on the other hand, that it's romantic love, the one that everything can do, that everything can stand, the violent love. Well, precisely working on that so that they can have a critical point of view of that. Gender-based violence and the fact of homophobia as well, because we know that there's bullying on these schools where we spoke about a rejection to feminine world, not just to women, but also to other identities as well. So that they can respect that and overcome the pressure, as we were speaking about homosexuality and how they assess each other and how they evaluate and how men should be. So overcoming this male group pressure and egalitarian masculinities, we believe that it is a big challenge to work with male teachers so that they can be trained and increase their knowledge, their practice, and so they in the future can teach to their students regarding those toolkits and these values that can explain what an gender egalitarian masculinity could be. So we are giving a critical thinking regarding stereotypes of masculinity, and this is going to allow healthier unions, healthier links to understand how to reflect on consensus, on consent, so that violence is not exercised. There's reciprocity, where we can recognize masculine and feminine as similar without hierarchy, but at the same time, it's going to allow men themselves who are going through all of these mandates can also express in a free manner, in an autonomous manner, in a healthy manner, without having this pressure to follow these mandates that are going to consolidate their masculinity and that could be a different identity, egalitarian. So thank you very much, and I hope I've been able to summarize in such short time. So Anya, thank you very much for all the big work you're doing. So thank you.
And we have Sibylle Ganz-Koechlin. She is of Triple T, training the trainers, who is going to talk to us about, and I let her tell you directly herself. I'm going to share my slides.
Hi, everybody. Beatrice, you can go directly to the next slide, please. What I'm going to talk about is a program that came up during a teacher training. This is a teacher training I took over from the Bernese Association of Teachers. And they wanted to move their program from primary to secondary school. So in Tanzania, as you can see here, in these two schools or school districts where the trainings were, the teachers had organized Women's Week, talking about female scientists and writers, etc. But then, next slide, please. They said, well, actually, we have quite a lot of other issues concerning gender roles, the role of girls and boys, as we have also just heard from Lizeth. And there were quite frightening developments. This school, the largest in the district, there are 1,500 young people at this school, and about 900 of them are at the boarding school. So there were assaults that happened, harassments in boarding school. The girls were not safe on their way to school. The teachers were also, some of them involved, asking for favors, etc., etc. So this became an ever larger problem. And the teachers and I and a social worker, we sat together to see what we could do. There was also a delegation of students between 15 and 18 years old. You can go to the next slide, please, who were in this group as well, deciding what would be the best approach. So we came up with doing a program that is, or offering a program that is outside of the classroom, because the students mainly said, I don't really want to talk to my teacher about these issues. It's bad enough if I have to report an incident, but even I don't really want to talk to a teacher, maybe a teacher of another gender. So we thought, okay, we will take this out of the classroom. Another focus was also on gender identities, gender roles. What does it mean to be a man? And the third issue was that we looked for programs that were already there, because the teachers simply do not have the resources to develop new things themselves. So we found two things. Can you go to the next slide, please? The first was an independent trainer who had started with self-defense for girls, but she came on board putting this together. This works in an umbrella system. She trains trainers and they then train the younger children. It's very important actually to have the physical aspects, because the girls are taught to be quiet, to be respectful, especially respectful of men, and even of their fellow students. So the first thing the trainer said, we have to teach the girls how to shout, how to make themselves heard, and to teach them that they are allowed to shout. Next slide, please. So then they go to the actual self-defense training, because they were actually afraid that the boys in their boys group they were going to become even stronger. The girls would be even more overwhelmed. So they very much enjoyed the physical training. You can go to the next slide. And after this, and during the physical training, there is a lot of discussion about gender roles. The boys' training was originally called Peace is a Decision. And this is a training where we also talk about violence, we talk about controlling impulses, we talk about feelings, about peace, and what does it mean to be a man? You can go to the next slide. Choosing to be a good man, meaning you can go to the next slide. This goes much in the same direction as Lizeth already talked about, except that it's an African initiative, the Regional Psychosocial Support Initiative, who devised this program. And it's schools can use this, and in the beginning they also helped us with trainers. And if you want to go to the next slide, this is the kind of work that they do. These are the practical examples. Now, this is, yeah, I see the question, boys being trained on peace while girls are trained in self-defense. Mm-hmm. Yes, that does seem kind of ironic. But in the end, when it all comes together, it makes sense, because this Peace is a Decision is just kind of a title for this workshop, which if you go to the next slide and the next one, you will see that it's actually a lot about finding your identity, finding out who you are. And then this is, I can take this question right now. They're not trained together in the beginning because they didn't want that. They especially requested to have separate trainings. And after they have gone through these trainings separately, they come together when they actually start talking also about gender identities, about the blurring of binary gender identities. So that's it. I think I'm already, my time is up. Yeah, that's it.
Now we'll go to the third presentation. So another rich insight, this time from Cristina Carulla. She's education specialist with Enfants du Monde. And let us see what she presents to us. Please, Cristina.
I will share with you my experience in the process of designing a teaching and learning sequence on the topic of poverty and menstruation for a program in Chad. I will identify the different strategies that guided the process, and I will try to reflect on the limitations that emerge when there are not conceptual tools to address gender issues. Next slide, please. The decision to develop a didactic sequences on poverty emerged from the identification that many girls drop out of school at the time of the onset of menstruation. A diagnosis was carried out in the Moyen-Chari region to delimit the problem, trying to identify which kind of educational needs were needed, and to determine the content of the teaching and learning of the teaching material. Next slide, please. For example, it was observed that in the Moyen-Chari, it is not discussed menstrual bleeding and how to handle it with girls. that men must be protected from women during the menstruation, so it is forbidden to cook for them on the day of menstruation. And then once a girl becomes a woman, it is considered that she should not go to school. Next slide, please. As educational need, it was determined the importance of teaching young people about the change they are experiencing and the differences between what happened to a girl and what happened to a boy. Likewise, practical knowledge was considered, such as identifying the menstrual cycle through a calendar in order to adequately be prepared for the arrival of menstruation. Next slide, please. The process of designing the teaching material was carried out with teacher trainers from Chad, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Benin. And the content was determined during a seminar in the framework of a master's degree at the University of Abomey-Calavi. During our exchanges, emerged different representations on menstruation in their own cultures. Next slide, please. In the teaching material, one of the workshops contains activities for the children to reflect on their own and their community's representations of menstruation in Chad, on other world representation of menstruation, and on the scientific representation of menstruation. As part of the process of constructing the sequence, we discuss also about how to represent the body of the woman and the girls, the boys, trying to think about that this material will be used in different regions in the country. Next slide, please. A colleague from our organization with expertise in gender issues made an analysis of the material, and that allowed her to bring to our attention some points about what is and is not said about girls or boys, and possibilities to use the content to serve not only practical needs, but also strategic interest. Next slide, please. For example, the colleague identified that it was written in the teaching material that for men, erection is maintained during sexual pleasure, whereas pleasure is not mentioned in the case of women. She also pointed out that providing access to information about changes in their bodies could have been used to empower and raise awareness among boys and girls about themselves and their relationship to gender dynamics in the community. Thank you for your attention.
We have what are the role of the parents and community here in green, and then a similar question, how to deal with parents, with teachers. So somehow related, maybe not exactly overlapping, but still. Then we have, are there any opponents from people who are against changing things that could be in power, could also have a lot to do with how to work with the community and parents? Here also, how is it perceived by the community? Someone is putting things in order. Thank you. I'm trying to jump with you. That was the question that we had already before in the chat. Why were there separate groups? Boys and girls need to exchange together. I think Sibylle already referred to that at the end of her presentation. And I would like to suggest that we take a few minutes now to listen to the three speakers with regard to this involvement of parents, community, also groups or individuals who might be opposing to even talk about this question or to challenge power relations. And I look at Lizeth, Sibylle, and Cristina, whether you would like to share and reflect on that specific question.
About the parents, you mean?
Yes, so we're talking about the broader topic of how to work, how to involve parents, what's the role of the parents, communities also, and then maybe in relation also to this question of opposing opinions to even tackle this issue, power relations.
Entiendo que la pregunta está vinculada a cómo trabajar con los padres y la
How
comunidad.
to work with parents and the community, okay? The power relationship, the exercise of power, and the identity between genders. I think it's a very big challenge because of the cultural matter and the historical matter. It's a very big challenge to work with them because, well, human beings, we've all grown with different types of manners of being a man, manners of being a woman, the different roles. So we have a historical and cultural load that comes before us, but it can be done through campaigns of sensitization. I think we need to create strategies. We cannot tell parents, well, you mother, father, caregiver, your son is violent, so we're going to change him. Why? Because people, of course, will feel offended, and it's not an exercise that it has to be done. Well, it has to be done with care, and we know that there are some exercises specifically for violence towards children. There you need to work on social education, and there's conservative groups that do not want to work with this because they believe that this is going to promote early sexual practices and so on. So they also think that it is inadequate. So how can we work with them? How can we work from their role as teachers, and how could I motivate others to have better experiences? How we can have our kids remember us, what kind of a mother, a father, or a caregiver would I like to be? How would I want to have been treated when I was a child? So from their sensibility before they can become violent, of course. So on another subject, the community, also giving the message, maybe working with the local communication media, the radio for the community radio works very well to sensitize, to get to know this, to have contact with local authorities, with institutions, with health centers, churches, of course, why not? And also work with this to create awareness with authorities, with social organizations, so that little by little we can disassemble the stereotypes, but at the same time trying to understand how community leaders can protect through the leadership and how it could be good for society, for the well-being of everyone, not telling them, well, leader, they have to be violence-free, because it's not going to work due to the cultural or social-cultural. So I would leave it there so that the other colleagues can mention their ideas as well.
Thank you very much, Lizeth. Sibylle or Cristina, would you like to add from your perspective?
Yeah, well, there's one thing that the larger school district is, as I said, a boarding school. So there are not that many parents around. But the good thing was that the neighboring community, they took up this topic and they said, well, we think we need to do something. So the elders took it up, and they have had some sessions where they discuss problems of violence. They started with that because there's also still quite a lot of violence at schools, children being beaten, young people being beaten. But this is, you know, we were, of course, very happy to have the community participate and to see how they take this on. But actually, this is another level, you know, this is a societal level which goes beyond the scope of this project. What we hope to achieve is that not we, but the young people know that they do have a choice, that they can choose what their role should be, what their gender identity should look like. And, you know, we talk a lot about stereotypes, etc., and not to promote them. So this is actually the point, that they know I do have a choice and I am entitled to choose, and that their attitudes, because these are teenagers and young people, that their own attitudes and their own sense of self and self-value will help also to change the attitudes of their parents. So this is kind of an indirect approach that we take in working with the parents. And yeah, maybe Cristina wants to say something too.
Yes, thank you. So our approach is to try to arrive from the school, because the material we create is for primary schools. So it's that in the teaching material, young people will learn all this content with a main goal to do a project. And the project is shared then with the community. So all the learning process will be shared with the community by making a brochure or making a piece of theater or different kind of communication support to share with the parents and community what they learn. So that's the strategic point of working with community and with parents, that we use not only about gender, but all problems, or all kind of problems that the communities in different regions where we work are facing. So it's the way we try to make children as a vector of change in the community.
Let's do it the following way, because we have 6 minutes left and we want to do a little kind of getting together on what was discussed. I am going to share the slides, and I ask the moderator of the group to basically say what's already written there so that it's translated in the other language. So we have it all. So I'm going to and we start with group 1, Lizeth or someone else from the group.
Yeah.
And we just basically summarize what's in.
Yeah. Okay. So, sí, lo voy a comentar. Bueno, a leer lo que hemos escrito.
Okay, I will comment. I'm going to read what has been said, we have discussed in our group. We've discussed about the influence of technologies in the constructions of identities and how to adapt to these. It's a subject that is a conversation in the new generations. It's a multi-generational topic. And what's the impact that this has on technologies and social networks and the construction of identities? How also to integrate other audiences in the use of the created tools, regarding the tool that was created from the group of from Peru, and how to make these tools sustainable. Also, how we can allow empowering models that were created in schools with the girls can continue in their own houses or communities, because it's like Well, they can be empowered, but as they leave their classrooms or the school, well, this disappears. So those were the discussions we had within the group.
Thank you so much, Anne.
I don't know if Lizeth maybe would like to add something.
Actually, we don't have time.
Okay,
I'm really sorry, but I know at 5 o'clock
Okay,
I really have to run off. And let's have a look here, please. Group 2, Sibylle or someone from the group.
Andrea, can you do that? Andrea wrote the notes.
Yes, of course. I just took some notes while we were discussing. So as a first step, we discussed quite a lot about what is violence and on the importance of really, when working on violence, first defining violence, because that violence can also be seen as normal discipline, especially at home. So that it is physical, psychological, structural, etc. violence, and only as a second step at the core of this program that Sibylle described, we focus on self-protection. We discussed the question of how to react with violence on violence when we learn on self-protection, if this is okay. And yeah, we think if you're attacked, it's good to be able to react, even though it's the last choice, and it should only be done when it's really needed. We discussed further what are the biggest challenge. It were similar as we already discussed before. How does it come from the school program to parents, communities, which is less important in that program because it's a boarding school, many children not having parents anymore. But in general, what are the levels of violence? Did the program suggest different reaction on different levels of violence? The answer from Sibylle was no, not directly, but of course it was discussed. And yeah, maybe I let you continue or someone else continue.
No, it's fine. Let's hear the last group.
Thank you so much.
Just in case I missed something.
Thanks, Andrea. I think it was a great, certainly the most important points. And let's also give the third group the opportunity to make a short summary of their main points. Cristina or someone else from your group?
I invite Louise that write down the key points to do it if she wants.
Maybe I will start and you can then continue. I think we had a discussion about how the program is a very systemic approach, which is about really it's about involving all kinds of actors within the society, and it's about changing the paradigm of education as well. So it's about involving people in the ministry who are actually approving changes within the material right now, and at the same time also working with teachers on the ground. And I think you also mentioned again that it is very important to work with the people on the ground so that they decide about the material that is going to be taught, and also that they develop the theoretical background themselves. And that is also one of the reasons why this project is so successful. We also spoke about challenges, but I actually think we did not really come up with any big challenges, just that the school system there is maybe a bit difficult because it is very much focused on testing, and that it is very difficult to change this or to and maybe you want to continue, Cristina.
No, let's finish. You spoke of the important issues.
Thank you all so much, also for really being concise now by trying to point out the main points that came out in your discussions, and for your understanding that we couldn't go any deeper and further because our time is up. I think the topic is not at an end at all. We all agree we would have liked more time for all of the discussions that we had. I would like to invite you now to use the chat and to write down anything else that you weren't able to say now in the summary, or a question that you haven't been able to raise. We will collect these inputs and they will be part of the report. They will also go back to the working group, Teacher Training for Quality Education, who has kindly organized this OROS on this very important topic. You can already start writing down your comments, further questions, or things that you think your takeaways from today's discussion, your biggest learning. And I will continue speaking and thanking everyone who was involved in the preparation and facilitation of today's OROS. So let me start with Nadine, who has done a great job in preparing everything, communicating, mobilizing participants, informing you beforehand, and doing all the technical and content stuff today. Really, thank you very much, Nadine, for this. Then I would like to thank Anne. So she's representative of the working group, and you've seen her also. She co-moderated the OROS and also gave a lot of discussion inputs in the groups. Thank you very much, Lizeth Vergaray, for your excellent presentation and this insight in your work in Peru from Terre des Hommes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cristina, from Enfants du Monde, for this very specific, interesting approach. So teaching mathematics and gender sensitive teaching. What an interesting question. Thank you very much for sharing this. Sibylle, thank you for your excellent presentation on gender-based violence and how to tackle this. Who have I forgotten? Anaï Garardo, thank you so much. She's a member of the working group again, and she's been very conducive for preparing this OROS. Who have I forgotten? All the participants, obviously. Thank you all for joining us from all over the world.